All right, we are back for another exciting week of GPS Live. Well, I know the tune. You can't help but dance. I saw
It's
you
groovy. I was getting a little.
doing with it. If you like the tune, let us know in the comments. But hey, welcome everybody for joining in on this Friday, 1:30 Eastern, 10:30 a.m. Pacific here on GPS Live. My name is Jonathan Singer. I am joined by.
Ian Meyer, how are you?
Oh well, man. Thanks for popping in this week. It's been a little bit busy. A lot of great stories that we're going to cover. But you're new to the show. Welcome.
It's
Welcome to the pod.
true. I'm new to the show. I'm new to Guide Point. I'm new in everything except for beard color.
You got
Absolutely.
wait, what?
Beard color. Well, that's gray. It used to be dark.
Oh,
You know.
well, touch gray. Well,
We'll work. We'll work on that joke. We'll work on that.
I will consider you wise of all ages and look forward to our discussion today. But this is GPS Live for the week of May 17th. 2024. We really appreciate all those that are watching live online. Let us know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. We do read all comments. And also, if you're watching this in the future, still leave a comment. We get notifications. We come back and we check on what's going on. But with that in mind, before we kick things off, we always got to do the views and opinions expressed by the hosts of this live stream are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official opinions of Guide Point Security. We gotta make sure that our butts are covered here because we are just two talking heads floating about what we think is cool. There's also sometimes we may mention particular brands by name. By no means are we endorsing nor speaking poorly of any of these. We just, feel like it's important to the story and people should know about it. So.
Yeah. News is news, and give our friends in the security injury. I almost said security injury, which
it's
is
okay. It feels like an injury sometimes.
It does. Well, I was going to say hug ops to everyone, including my vocabulary right now.
Well, great. By the way, love the background. And we were kind of running some virtual stuff, but your background does remind me of the good days when I had all kinds of fun stuff back there. So, but without further ado, we'll jump right into it. First things first, what we're looking at today is guess what? Wi-Fi has a new vulnerability. And we were talking a little bit before the show, trying to really break this down and understand what's going on here. But particularly an article coming to us from a site called Top 10 VPN. They're focused on this new vulnerability called an SSID confusion attack. And so right, we're trying to put the pieces here. Ian, what did you get from this and like as far as how to execute it?
Yeah, so I mean, the vulnerability itself that's being reported is in the 802.11 protocol. So for those listening, maybe you're new to security or whatnot, this is how Wi-Fi actually happens, how you connect, how you get your IP, how data moves. And these researchers found a vulnerability that allows them to leverage networks that don't necessarily authenticate your SSID, the SSID being the network name. You go home and it says like home sweet home or whatever. That's your network ID, right? So they go through, they get that ID and they spoof it. They make it look like it's your corporate network or whatever it is. And then a bunch of security controls like VPN just turn off because they think you're on a trusted network or you're on a known network or things like that. So there's a lot that comes out of this article, a lot of research and a lot of things that go into it, but it is a very fundamental flaw in the way that Wi-Fi actually works. So that's what I took from it. What'd you get from it, John?
Well, so my understanding is right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this sounds, similar to maybe a more modern version of like the Karma attack, which would or an evil twin AP. Right? The idea is that a secondary access point broadcasting a particular SSID is convincing your device otherwise that it is the one you want to connect to over anybody else. And oftentimes kind of that example scenario we were working through is, well, when I'm in a safe place or a known network, my security controls may be a little bit more lax. Whereas when I'm in a rogue place like a Starbucks or a McDonald's with that lively open Wi-Fi, then suddenly my device has controls that kick up, right? A VPN is automatically enabled, a bunch of other things. But there was also an example that talked about kind of a machine in the middle perspective
Mhm,
too, where there was like almost like a relay.
mhm.
Uh, talk about downgrading, where connecting to a less secure one potentially could confusing. There's a number of different things here,
There's a
but
lot
there,
going on. You're 100% right. You nailed it. Is this is one of those types of vulnerabilities that I think researchers are gonna dig their teeth into. They're gonna
Mhm.
go, "Wait a minute, I know this tool or this process utilizes the network ID. I wonder if," and we're gonna see a lot come out of this, I think.
No, I definitely agree. There is a CVE applied to it. So like we're not just sitting here talking about something, that's speculated via research. This is definitely confirmed. We're the weirdest thing too is I just rolled out WPA3 at home. Like, I mean, RIP some of my legacy devices on their own
Right.
subnet over there. But yeah, I'm running WPA3 over here. And then come to find out, WPA2 is actually not affected by this, but WP3 surely is. And then our good old friend Wep, all two of you
Right.
out there.
Yeah, we were talking about that before the show. I saw WEP and I'm like, "Oh, oh, thankfully, all of our web clients are still safe."
Yeah. If you run WEP on your wireless at home, please feel free to let us know in the comments below. And also feel free to chime in with your favorite SSID. Um, but no, we'll be keeping an eye on this because part of many, audit and compliance standards do involve wireless audits, right? One of our favorite ones being PCI, for instance, does often involve a wireless security audit to make sure that there's no rogue APs, fake things set up, opportunities for people to accidentally connect to something that they shouldn't. I was doing those PCI wireless audits like 8, 9 years ago. I mean, we're still doing that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, it does play a critical role. Again, just like a lot of the internet, as you mentioned, we're still trying to grasp fully what's going on here. There are some mitigations that are put into
Yeah, I was
play.
gonna say we should definitely talk about some of the things that you can do, which
Yeah.
were kinda listed out in that article. But I think the biggest takeaway that I took from that is if you are a corporate defender and you are the type of person who is charged with making sure that these laptops out in the wild connecting to, uh, you know, APs and whatnot, because that's what they got to do business. You got people on the road, they're traveling, that you configure your VPN if you have a stance on VPN to say you must be on VPN when on an unknown network.
Mhm.
Configure it so that if that network drops or if that network changes, or even if it is starts showing as a trusted network,
Mhm.
configure it so that it stays on VPN. I've worked at several companies where even though the data center was literally in the next room, we still had to connect a VPN to get to privilege access. So that was
Mhm.
one. There was another one though, John, if you want to cover that, or I can. Um,
I'll let you run with it.
Okay. Yeah. So the other thing that you can do is make sure that your four-way handshake, and we're going to get super technical, but your four-way handshake for how your Wi-Fi actually connects to the network includes mechanisms for validating the SSID is coming from a known network device, a known network, and actually validate that it's not a rogue AP. And we will get into more detail on that because you're going to have to dive into your Wi-Fi controller and whatnot to see how you would configure that. But those are the things that they say to do.
Yeah, between that, we'll probably see some potential firmware updates pushed out from different manufacturers and vendors, firmware updates for your hardware, not just your cards within your computers, but and your phones, but also your wireless routers and other access points and things that equally need to be able to patch this challenge happening here. But that's not the only thing when we're talking about devices that are trying to improve their wireless security. In fact, this is a great segue
Mhm.
for us to kind of work our way into our next featured story, coming to us from the Hacker News, Android 15, which I believe is still beta. I am an iPhone person through and through. I'm sorry for all of you Android fans out there. I get it.
But you're getting new features, Android fans. So yay.
Yeah, there you go. Your security is now improving. So the new Android 15 that's going to be rolling out here, like I said, I think it's still in beta, has really stepped their game up. I found some really interesting security controls that are being applied in more of a hardware fashion. But I want you to talk about some of the software and API security controls that we're kicking in.
Yeah, there was a bunch of good stuff in this article, and it's great. It's nice to see that Android, adding these features in. But the thing that stuck out to me was the Play Integrity API. They've
Mhm.
made some changes so that if you're a developer of an app, you can call this API and get some of this new functionality to say, "Hey, are there any screen grabbing software running? Are there any malicious apps running on the phone?" And this API then allows, Google can then query and say, yeah, no, there are these things that you've listed that you're concerned about, or that we've listed that are that is a concern, and can then inform the app. So that API uses kind of the trusted relationship between the phone and Google to do those queries, and then just responds back to the app and says, nope. And then the app can make a decision on whether or not to execute whatever function it's checking. I think that's brilliant. I think that's a really great idea. I'm sure there are some abuse cases we could come up with, but making that kind of thing available to developers so that they don't have to, I hate to use the term boil the ocean or reinvent the wheel, but that's really it. Reinvent these things in their apps and just call an API. It's wonderful.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, my example I was thinking of was like, what if you have a banking app or something, right? And it's clearly on screen, and but before the app displays any of that financial information or medical, information, it's going to ask the phone, is there anything potentially capable of capturing the screen that's running right now in the background? Is there anything potentially capable of capturing touch input or keyboard input that's running in the background right now? Is there anything that's capable of potentially intercepting data traffic that's running in the background right now? And if any of those fail, well, then I probably shouldn't display. So yeah, fantastic to allow developers of applications that may be using sensitive
Well,
information.
since you gave
To
me such a nice setup, we were talking before the show. You were interested in some of the hardware side, so why don't you talk about some of the hardware side?
Yeah, so my favorite update that's part of this is the fact that there's now cellular security that's going to be really stepping their game up. For those out there that play at home with femtocells, or the more famous version, the Stinger or Stingray, this is going to be able to alert the user if their cellular network connection suddenly becomes unencrypted versus its prior state of being encrypted, or if these bogus base stations, and really, I think last time I checked, the entry level for a good femto cell built by hand was $300.
Yeah, that's not much. Not for an attacker.
Yeah, so one of these potentially fake or surveillance tool base stations, it's going to be able to identify that based on a number of characteristics versus a real one that's put out by a cellular company,
Mhm.
and it's going to alert you. This is something that we've seen for many years. For instance, they used to set up fake cell phone networks at DEF CON. Remember when they'd have their own private networks that were running around?
I was
And
gonna say there was what was there was some group
Ninja Cell, Ninjatel.
was that it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah, it was
so
something Tell, yeah, and they set up their
Ninjatel
own.
had their own cell phone network, and again, right, the FCC may say otherwise, that you can and can't do that, but specifically, this is still happening, whether it is in some kind of surveillance tool, part of a warrant, or somebody who has a malicious intention to take over and intercept your cellular traffic. They are kicking up a lot more security around that. So I thought that was super cool. One of the other things that I saw that I wanted to also call out is that they're really starting to take on some of the security controls that I'm actually already seeing in my Apple. So the tables have turned.
That's
They are
awesome.
they're it's not just Apple catching up to Android features, but on my phone, if I get a one-time password via SMS, it doesn't do the drop bar. It hides, and then I have to go into the SMS and I have to bring up the message. And so, if for some reason, like we were saying, if somebody's snooping on the device or if something's capturing the screen, it's not just an automated dump of this 6-pin data to whatever's looking at it. And so I thought that was also a very
Yeah.
cool feature.
Yeah, because I mean, there are shoulder surfing attacks, especially like imagine we were talking a little bit about the Wi-Fi thing before, but in an airport, and someone is a nation state. If you're a DoD contractor, someone who is a highly targeted
Oh, God.
individual,
Sure.
suddenly they force a the multi-factor
Pin.
to come
Yeah.
through, and if you've got your phone configured so that notifications can come on while locked, that's it. Bob's
Yeah.
people, right?
I completely agree. Yeah, those and it's not to say that these kind of scenarios that we're hypothesizing about couldn't really happen, right? You can be sitting there playing on your phone unlocked, and all that's going to happen is that little text message notification is going to drop on the top of the screen, and it takes a split second for somebody over your shoulder in a restaurant and to get a peek of that 6-digit pin, and now they have what 30-60 seconds to go. Um, and oftentimes the user may not even be aware, or throw in a little bit of MFA fatigue while
Yeah,
you're at
yeah, yeah.
it, because then it's like, these stupid things, blah blah blah. So, but kudos on Google and Android for rolling out a number of great ones. You can get a more complete list on Google's website as they're rolling out Android 15 and a lot of the security measures. Uh, but those are just, I thought, a couple cool ones that we wanted to highlight and
Yeah, it's always great to see major vendors doing anything moving the security needle forward, and so anything at all, and these are really good ones, but anything at all is always better. So kudos to the Android team.
Of course, of course. Now, without that, one of the things I did kind of want to still highlight as part of this article is we do have an ongoing challenge, regardless, with targeted malware for mobile devices. Right? It's not something new. We've talked about it on the show before. Examples of things like Pegasus, for instance, which are used by nation states and developed for the sole purpose of spying on individuals, oftentimes marginalized or members of the media, to simply, I guess, make the situation worse, we'll call it. And so by adding or constantly improving mobile device security, whether it is Apple or Android, we'll continue to be able to combat. Obviously, some of these larger threats are intentionally developed ODAs that are going after devices. But if there's just any way that some of these malicious side-loaded apps that we see, whether it's coming from the Play Store itself or a third-party app store, can be prevented from capturing and stealing additional data. That's kind of the big purpose behind a lot of this, right? You'd be surprised. There are countries where things like Play Store and Apple Store are actually not functional or not allowed, or a lot of the apps that are considered popular in Western are not on those regional stores. And so people intentionally have to seek out a third-party app market. And sadly, again, another thing we've talked about on the show before is that those third-party app markets are often backdoored. Like
Oh yeah,
it's a fully functional version of the app you're looking for, but it also has some treats, right?
yeah. No, that is very common. I mean, we saw that. I can think of probably 5 or 6 examples. But I'm not going to call out one specific app, but yeah, any time there's a phrase that I love where it's like, you can create a structure or one will be created for you, something to that effect. And you can either, allow these apps and figure out a way for them to be allowed, or people will find a way to get them. And if they find a way to get them, you're giving away control. You're saying, hey, you can get that infected app. Your kids can download that infected version of Minecraft. I may have some experience here. Things like that. And then you've got to deal with it because you didn't have a plan to do it the way that it's intended. Now, like I said, in this case, oftentimes it's nation states and the laws around that, and it's obviously way more complicated, but it's still the same basic premise.
Absolutely. And so with that kind of in mind, we'll kind of keep rolling over here for the show, but always update your devices for security patches. That's the take home from that one. Um, which, by the way, also, if you recently updated to the new iOS version, there is a known flaw that is allowing deleted photos to be recovered. So there are separate challenges in the other direction. Just keep your eye out. And
I have to drop off. I have some photo curation to do. I'll be right back.
I'm sorry. Oh,
I'm kidding.
sorry.
It was a joke. It was a joke.
Forensics would say otherwise.
Oh,
Oh man, it brings me back to the days when it was like, look at every time you locked your
Mhm.
iPhone screen, the way it used to do is it would take a screenshot and then create an animated effect of it shrinking. And then
Oh
all
yeah,
of those screenshots were stored on the device that you could recover later. And so whatever was on the screen at the time you put it to sleep
yeah.
um, was capturable.
I
Again,
forgot about that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I remember. I'd completely forgotten about that, but yeah, you're
yeah,
right.
iPhone forensics. If you are an iPhone forensics analyzer, we'd love to hear about it in the comments.
Mm.
But to keep things rolling on, our next story coming to us is about API security, and we're not trying to target any particular business here, but we want to talk about kind of the bigger picture and what's going on regarding cybercrime and fraud and
Mhm.
uh, some of those basic OWASP API top 10 controls that you really can implement from any perspective. I've recently taught a class on API security, and the biggest takeaway was that this is one robot talking to another robot. And it's assumed that robots follow the rules because that's what they're programmed to do. But you can always intercept that conversation, or you can pretend to also be a robot and no longer follow the rules. And that's what's happening in this particular case, where major manufacturer here had their API abused by a malicious party simply creating an account to masquerade as a service partner, right? Somebody who works with the company and needs to query data on laptops and machines, right?
Yeah.
But it goes a little bit beyond that.
Yeah, no, I mean so those APIs that were being used are through and this is just news again, hug ops to Dell because they are over there dealing with what is being perceived as a fairly large breach. Now, that's not my decision to make. The lawyers get to decide what's a breach and what's not. But that API delivered at least the claim from the attackers. It delivered full name and address of the person or company name that bought the computer, the address, city, province, postal code, country, unique 7-digit service tag. And for those unfamiliar, Dell uses a service tag system. You can think of that as the unique serial number. System shipped with the warranty, what the warranty plan is, and then Dell customer number and Dell order number. Now, these things on their own,
Yeah.
and John and I were talking about this before, these things on their own do not meet the standards by most states for what would be considered PII, personally identifiable information. It's also not necessarily very dangerous because the service tag numbers, you or I or anybody could go to Dell.com, enter in the service tag number, and find out all the information about the machine. Most of that info that is just public. You can get it, right? Where things get interesting, and I'll hand back to you, John, because where things get interesting is I would say from a disclosure purpose, this really is kind of a nothing burger in disclosure based on regulation and law. However, if you're an attacker with this information, there's maybe some things you can do. So, yeah.
Yeah, the little bits and bytes on their own don't seem like much, but this is like one of those cases where a whole lot of lows turn into a high, and from a vulnerability sense. And by putting the pieces together, and like you said, service tags, you can go get pictures off of eBay, you can go on second market. These things aren't necessarily necessarily a trade secret, but if you have a serial number plus a bunch of other contact information of almost what you would consider a guaranteed existence of a product at a business, you can build one heck of a phishing campaign. And that's
There you go.
probably what we're going to see here in the coming days, because it is being made known that this information is for sale online. And so it has been confirmed that those 49 million records of things like monitors, notebooks, Chromebooks, laptops, desktops, servers, all kinds of things like that. But in addition, all the things about it. So imagine crafting some kind of phishing campaign of, hi, your service is going to be canceled, or you need to, somebody's trying to claim ownership of this service tag. Here's all your business information because it's part of this. And here's that unique serial number, right? That service tag. It's going to look very convincing because all of the pieces line up. It actually, it's like the message is accurate to all the data bits. And that could really lead to something interesting. And for the sake of time, I did want to just mention that the main threshold that led to this was the fact that there was no rate limiting on the API. And that's just one of those things that if you feel like a bot is starting to take advantage of your API endpoint, you need to put a little threshold on that, because our next article is related to the website that was hosting the record list, that is Breach Forums. This name is very popular amongst cyber criminals because it's been around for a number of years, but it also is popular amongst police because it was taken down last year under the original administrator. In fact, June of last year, so almost a year to the day, it is taken down a second time, right?
It's the anniversary that takes so long. Aw.
But it's another one of those really good international approaches by a number of different policing organizations from around the world, like Germany and New Zealand, UK, Iceland even was involved in this. And so the websites that were running Breach Forum, and just to be clear, Breach Forum is one of those really brazen websites because they run on what's called the clear web, right out here on the normal internet. And so they have like a standard TLD. In fact, they have a number of TLDs. So you can visit their site, breachforum dot whatever, flavor of the month, because they cycle through them.
Right.
Obviously, it's still accessible via the dark web under normal circumstances. Right now, the site's down. It has been taken. But
The king is dead. Long live the king.
I called out something really interesting here, and it was a follow-up because the original article is from SC Media, but on Bleeping Computer, what did you see that was totally out there from this?
From Bleeping Computer?
Yeah.
The Telegram forums?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems that Europol and all the other organizations, we don't know who, but one of them also was able to capture the Telegram account and was trying to use that as well to, capture more intelligence, etc. And I had seen some memes that were posted through, so it wasn't necessarily inside of here, but yeah, the people posting memes from that account through DMs where they're saying, "Hey, were you really taken down?" And whoever was running it on the other side was like responding back with memes. It was very, very interesting. But we're seeing more of this stuff, right? Where the international law enforcement community is getting very, very good at building a playbook for new, website distributing. That type of data is up. Let's go and shut them down. So, I mean, that's a really good thing. But just like anything, attackers evolve. Law enforcement needs to evolve. So, great job by international law enforcement. I look forward to seeing how Breach Forums comes back in its new form.
Yeah, we don't know what it's going to look like because Breach Forums, as far as a history timeline for our viewers go, was born out of the idea that Raid Forums was taken down, right? And so when one, kind of gets its head chopped off, another three pop up in its place. And talking about, criminal activity, our last story coming to us for today, as we round out the top of the hour here, is the indictment of a Tornado Cash developer, and he was found guilty, in fact, and sentenced to 64 months in prison by a Dutch court. And I want to let you highlight this because you really called out something different, because Dutch politics and U.S. politics vary, and they want to make sure that this is known, that how this happened.
Right. Yeah. So I love the difference between the two legal systems. One, the Dutch are actually very understanding of security researchers. They don't necessarily, the Dutch and the Netherlands don't necessarily go after a lot of attackers, except, and my favorite quote from the story is essentially that they weren't going to charge him necessarily, but they had made a habit out of laundering money. And it's like, okay, I guess in the Netherlands you get a onesie like, oh, that was bad. Don't launder money, but you did it again. So it was very, very interesting. The way that the Dutch look at this as well is that if you're building the platform for money laundering, you are culpable, and that's the way I understand it. Not a Dutch lawyer, whatnot, but you're culpable for that money laundering, whereas other charges aren't being pressed in the U.S. because we don't have our laws written that way. It's, I built a platform, everything is pretty legal by how it works. How people are using it, not on me. So very, very interesting to see that play out in two different legal arenas.
And there's a couple other legal challenges that are happening as part of this. For instance, the other developers are also facing money laundering sanctions here in the United States. And finally, the reason why Tornado Cash is known to be so famous, other than the fact that it's a crypto washer, is that it was the choice crypto washer for the Lazarus Group, which is tied to North Korea. In fact, Lazarus Group is very famous for hacking many different types of crypto organizations and businesses in general, and in fact stealing hundreds of millions of dollars of cryptocurrency. And so from the perspective of government here, this platform allowed a very dangerous adversary to essentially fund themselves while washing the funds along the way and laundering it all the way through to fund whatever that campaign is on the horizon. And so it's an interesting and developing story. But as far as our good stuff for today, breach forums down and Tornado Cash washing for nation states also going to jail.
Yeah.
But hey, with that definitely rounds us out for today. Exciting stories always in the news. Again, this is GPS Live for May 17, 2024. Thank you for those watching live and also in the future. Please be sure to let us know if you think we're doing cool stuff. We love to hear from you. Again, my name is Jonathan Singer.
I'm Ian Meyer.
All right, and everybody have a wonderful weekend. See you.